Okay. All right. Well, welcome to these. I've been saying many different adjectives, but impromptu, unofficial are a couple of them. Organizer chats that I've been having. Um, a little bit of context for you. So, actually, um, you are the organizer of, or former organizer, we'll say, of Sin City Ruby, which is going to be an interesting chat specifically because you're the first organizer that I'm speaking to that I actually have been to your conference multiple times. Um, so that's going to kind of get to see a little bit of behind the scenes of a conference that I got to see, from a firsthand perspective. And you also have a kind of an interest in ask people about their first conference because I kind of want to know, like, maybe what they learned from their first conference to their last conference and kind of what their first experience was like so that maybe I can avoid some of the pitfalls or just do some of the things uh, as if I were a more experienced organizer, right? So you have a very unique origin story for your conference because you never planned to have a conference at first. You booked space for a class and then you found it hard to sell tickets for a class. And so you pivoted to what was that? What was that experience like? And what was it like to kind of have in mind, okay, I'm doing this class, and then all of a sudden you're organizing a conference. What was that kind of like?
Yeah, it was not as big of a deal as it might sound like because conference doesn't have to mean like a big Rails conf type thing or something like that. It can just be a small get together. And I had talked previously with Andy Kroll, who organizes Brighton Ruby, and he had said that when he did the first Brighton Ruby, he planned it such that if only 50 people came, that would be okay. And so I kept that in mind. And indeed, we had maybe about 40 people ultimately come to that first one. Um, and it was okay. I lost a little bit of money, but not much. Um, and it felt kind of like a meetup almost because it was just small. I've certainly been to meetups that are a lot bigger than the first Sin City Ruby was. So yeah, it didn't feel like that big of a deal. There was some money on the line and all that stuff, but the numbers weren't huge and it wasn't all that stressful.
Did you, or you knew you were organizing a conference, or once you knew you were organizing a conference, then you reached out to him? When did that conversation happen?
Sorry, the connection is a little choppy. Can you say that again?
Okay, yeah. So when did you talk to Andy Kroll after your conference and like reached out to him?
Hmm. No, I think I had talked to him before just on the podcast, on the
Okay.
Code with Jason podcast.
Oh, okay, nice. Gotcha. Um, how long did you have to kind of pull that first one together? And was it kind of a rush to like get speakers and sponsors and stuff? How much of that were you able to do?
I had a decent amount of time. I remember that it was 2022 when the conference occurred, and so I had started planning it around the fall of 2021. So fall of 2021 to March or April of 2022. So I had a number of months.
Okay.
And for me, getting speakers was easy. I chose not to do a CFP or anything like that because I wanted to keep the workload as light as possible.
Mhm.
So I just handpicked the speakers, and I already knew people from my podcast, so that was pretty easy. Um, and then let's see, there was another part of your question, but I don't remember what it
Were
was.
there any sponsors for that first one?
No, I chose not to do sponsors because, again, I wanted to keep the workload light and keep it simple.
Gotcha. So did you that you could like try to break even with just ticket sales for that first one?
Yeah. I thought there was a good likelihood that I could break even, and I came pretty close. I think we lost like 2,000 bucks on that event.
Hmm.
And it was here's a mistake that I made. Um, so my wife co-organizes the event. That's not the mistake. Um, I'm just saying that for context. But we chose to do catering for that first conference.
Mm,
Um, and it cost an insane amount. I don't remember, but it was like 40 bucks a person for like a crappy sandwich and some chips or something like that.
yeah,
And so I don't know, 40 times 40 is 1,600. I think it was more than that even. Um, but like it turns out nobody was expecting us to provide food, and like hardly anybody even ate the food. They like went out to lunch.
yeah,
And so that was kind of just like a total waste. And if we hadn't done that, we would have been in the black instead of in the red. So
right.
for the following 2 years, because I did it a total of 3 times,
Hmm.
the following 2 years I didn't do catering.
Gotcha. Yeah. Um, When you went to do sponsors the second year, did that factor in? Like, did you come up with a budget of like, okay, I'm going to set ticket prices here, and I have a goal of like getting this much sponsorship money. Did you kind of plan that out that way, or how did you think about that?
I didn't have a goal. I just wanted to get as many sponsors as I realistically could. Um, so I did no sponsors the first 2 years, and then the third and final year was the only year in which I did sponsors.
Oh, okay.
I just made a list of like the places that I knew of that I thought might be sponsors. Like I looked at people who had sponsored other conferences and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, and I thought of like people I knew and stuff like that. I think the first place I reached out to was Evil Martians,
Mm-hmm.
because I know Arena from Evil Martians, and I know that they sponsor a lot of conferences. So I reached out to her, and she said yes. Got a couple other sponsors too. Um, and financially, that helped out a lot. Um, I think I got somewhere in the neighborhood of like $10,000 worth of sponsorship that third year.
Gotcha.
Um, but the expenses for that third year were also really high, and I ended up losing a lot of money, but that's a different story. Um, with the sponsors, yeah, I just kind of made a list and then went through and asked people. Some people said no, and some people said yes.
Was it a lot of connections with people you already knew, or were you doing some like cold outreach, just reaching out to people you didn't know, asking them to sponsor?
I think both, but definitely mostly people I already knew.
Mm,
And in fact, maybe entirely people I already knew. I don't remember now because it was a bit ago that I was going through all that. Let's see, there was Evil Martians, Cedar Code, um, Cisco Meraki sponsored, which is actually where I work now, incidentally. Um, and I feel bad if I'm forgetting anybody, but I think those were the three.
yeah. Um, okay. And you mentioned earlier that you don't do a CFP or you didn't do CFP, you just kind of chose your speakers. Did
Hmm.
you have any kind of um, I don't know, plan for when you were reaching out to people? Did you want to like or did you just kind of reach out to people that you liked and ask them to do whatever talk?
Yeah, I just reached out to people who I thought would make sense. Um, some people have kind of a draw.
Hmm.
Like for example, I I think I tried to get Chris Oliver to speak for at least 2 years, maybe even all 3 times. On the third time, I finally got him, and he came and spoke. Um, but I picked him largely because I thought he would have a draw. You know, he's very much a known entity in the Ruby community.
Yeah.
Um, so I kind of did it like that. Um, yeah, and that's how it went. I really had no interest in ever doing a CFP because that just sounds like a lot of work.
Did you give speakers any guidance on what their talk should be like, or you just said you have 30 minutes, whatever you want?
If they asked for guidance, I would give that to them for sure.
Mm,
Most of the people were pretty experienced conference speakers, so they didn't really need it. They only asked questions like, "How long do you want my talk to be?" and stuff like that.
right.
Um, I think probably every year I've had at least one first-time speaker.
Mm,
Um, and sometimes they've asked for some guidance, like, "Hey, I'm thinking of speaking about this. Does that sound good?" Whatever. And so I give them some feedback on that, and just in general, like how how long their talk should be. Like I tell people that shorter is better. Like don't feel like you have to fill 45 minutes or something like that. Like if you go and speak for 20 minutes, like no one has ever been sad that a talk was like too short, you know?
yeah.
Um, Something I heard once about public speaking is people are just waiting for you to be done. And it's kind of the sad truth. Um, but yeah, I gave advice to those newer speakers, but again, a lot of them were already quite experienced.
Gotcha. Did you did you like pay for speakers' travel or give them a honorarium or anything like that?
Yeah, we did what we could for speakers. I think all 3 years, what we did was we just gave them an honorarium, and have never looked up the definition of honorarium,
Mhm.
but I think it's kind of like this is some money that we're giving you. We know that it's not nearly as much as we should be giving you, but here's something as like a token of our appreciation that can at least help cover your travel a little bit.
Yeah.
And I based the amount on what I had been paid at conferences that I've spoken at in past years, which is usually $0. But some conferences I've gone to and they pay like a $500 honorarium or something like that. So I
Mhm.
based that on that.
Gotcha. Um, let's see. I have some other questions here. So you have mentioned that you are done with since you might do other Ruby events in the future. Can you give us any idea of like what you're thinking about and how you're thinking about doing things differently from Sin City Ruby or maybe just conferences in general?
hmm Yeah, there's two main reasons I'm not inclined to do more Sin City Ruby events. Um, One is that Sin City Ruby happens in Las Vegas, and I live in Michigan, and
Hmm.
that's a long ways away. Um, and the other is in Las Vegas, it's hard to find a venue that is affordable and like checks all the boxes we need to check and stuff like that. And the third Sin City Ruby was just a big financial risk for us. And like I mentioned, we lost a lot of money. So I don't want to do that again.
Hmm.
Um, but what I would entertain is the idea of doing a lower risk event, something where, you know, to Andy Kroll's point, if only 50 people show up, that's fine. It'll still be profitable, whatever. I don't want to pay a $26,000 food and beverage minimum for a 2 day event like I had to for Sin City Ruby 2025. That was nuts.
Yeah.
Um, so that kind of thing. Um, and if I were to have it like in Michigan, like driving distance from my house, that would be a lot different and a lot better in a lot of ways because, for example, I could like just go drive over and scope out the venue
Hmm.
without having to like pay to go to Las Vegas, like fly there and do this whole thing just
Hmm.
to check out the venue, you know. We never did that because that wasn't a realistic that would just like eat away at the that would raise the expenses so much.
Right.
So I don't want to have to do anything like that. I'd rather do something closer. I don't have
Hmm.
anything specific in the works. Um, Frankly, for the last few months, I've been kind of burnt out. And so I'm not ready to think about anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to shed things and lighten my workload and not try to take on new things. But when I'm ready to think about that kind of stuff, I think it'll probably be uh, in Michigan if it happens at all.
Hmm. So I'm actually in the venue process right now. Um, what was it like working with the venues for Sin City Ruby? I know you had the Tropicana the first 2 years. Is and I know Vegas is probably going to be different than a lot of places because they do this, right? It's the conferences are a big thing there. So I'm sure it's a little bit different working with them. But what was like the process for getting a venue there?
Um, It was positively awful. All of the hotel people are the absolute worst. You would think that this being their main job, they would be like good at it,
Mhm.
but no, they're terrible at it, like unbelievably. And we actually, one year we looked into doing a conference instead of Las Vegas. We looked into doing it in Puerto Rico.
Oh,
Um, and our experience in both places was similar. Like, first of
mhm.
all, good luck even getting a response from the hotel.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we want to give you tens of thousands of dollars. You want to talk about that? No, they're not all interested in that conversation. Um, and then if you do get a response, it might be a really long time later, and they might like um, just totally miss really important stuff or ask like inane questions.
Mhm.
Um, um, Ask you the same questions you already answered to them and like
Yeah.
pass you around to different people and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
it's just an enormous hassle. I heard on a podcast once, this guy, Joe Paula, she said, a lot of businesses don't have a sales department, they have a sales prevention department. And that's what it felt like I was dealing with. I was dealing with the sales prevention department.
Yeah.
Um, and then once I got into the process, okay, so you usually fill out because you asked about the process. You usually fill out a form. They ask you like how many people you're expecting, what dates you're thinking, and all that kind of stuff. They'll contact you and you know give you an email that's worded in such a way that it doesn't make any sense, and you have to respond and ask what do you mean and stuff like that. But anyway, a conversation starts, um, and and they're gonna want some kind of deposit or something like that. Um, so you do that, um, get the scheduling taken care of. Maybe there's a little bit of like negotiation around budget and stuff like that. Quite often, in fact, I found this universally to be the case in Las Vegas. Um, they require you to have a room block in connection with your event
Mhm.
because they want that like guaranteed revenue from you.
Yeah.
Um, so in order to do this one, we had to have, we were expecting like we told them 100 people, but like we don't know. We just have
Yeah.
to guess. We said 100 people. So they made us do a room block for 100 people, and
Yeah.
we had to fill that to at least 80%. And if we didn't fill it to 80%, then we would be responsible for any rooms that we didn't fill.
Mhm.
Um, so that's a big part of where the risk comes from. And this hotel, I don't remember how much a night, but like multiply a couple $100 a night times 2 nights times 80 rooms. That's a pretty big number.
Mhm.
And that's the number that we were on the hook for. And then on top of that, in this case, the like $26,000 food and beverage minimum or whatever it was, because again, they want that guaranteed revenue. Um, I think we spent like I don't remember, but it was in the thousands. We spent thousands of dollars on bottled water. Yeah, yeah. Um, and water quite a lot of the time is free.
Yeah.
Um, just like in the world, you can go to a drinking fountain and just drink some water. Nobody charges you. In this case, we paid thousands of dollars for water. So that
Jeez.
was cool. Um, so I don't really recommend working with hotels because they're just the absolute worst. And they're like not nice, not friendly. Um, it's just awful. So screw them. I'm never gonna work with them again.
Yeah. I've had similar experience so far where I also naively just thought this would be an easy part of the process because I am going to give them thousands of dollars, and I thought they would be selling me, but instead I'm like chasing them, trying to give
Yeah.
them money,
Hmm.
which yeah is confusing. Um, but yeah. Um, okay. Um, how did you mentioned your wife was a co-organizer. How did you guys split responsibilities?
Um, for 2025, she took care of almost all the hotel stuff.
Mm,
So she did a lot of, very painful work uh, coordinating with these hotels. She handled all the financial stuff and all that.
hmm.
Um, Basically, I was responsible for the sales and marketing of it, and she was responsible for everything else. She made the website, everything else.
Nice. What did you do for marketing, and did that change from year to year?
Yeah, so kind of everything that I do is marketing.
Mm,
Um, Whether I intended it to be marketing for the conference at the time that I did it or not, like
right,
the podcast that I've been doing for the last however many years, 250 plus episodes worth. All that is marketing
right.
that benefited the conference. I didn't intend for it to be exactly that at the time I did it, except right before I did it, when I knew that I was going to do it. But that helped. All the writing that I've done, that helped.
Mm,
Again, choosing speakers that had a draw that was intentional for marketing purposes. And then on top of that, I would just like manually tell people.
mm,
Um, like I do a lot of just like networking calls. Like I email people and say like, "Hey, it's been a while since we've talked. Want to have a call to catch up or whatever."
mm.
I do that because it has a lot of business benefits, and it's just like I enjoy talking to people and having relationships and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, and so I did that before the conference, and I'm like, hey, just so you know, I'm putting on this conference, and a lot of people didn't know about it, and some people I told them about it, and then they bought a ticket.
Mm.
So that definitely worked more than zero times. I don't remember how many people bought tickets because of that. Not a lot of people, but at least some.
Yeah.
Um, And I talked about it. I talked about the conference on my podcast and on social media, and sent emails to my email list, and sent letters in the mail to my snail mail programming newsletter recipients,
Yeah.
and basically any way that I could tell people I was using all the channels that I already had.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have a you're probably the first organizer that I've talked to who has like a real following online that you could kind of use to help market this. Um, yeah, that definitely helps. But I love that just, telling people that you're putting on a conference. That's probably something that you wouldn't think of as a marketing tool, but it does work. And especially, if you're just putting on a conference with 100 people, every ticket counts. And if you tell
Mhm.
five people and they buy tickets, that was well worth the well worth the time. So
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, and I was talking mainly about marketing on the sales side. There wasn't a lot to that because it's not like I was negotiating prices or anything
Mhm.
like that. Although sometimes I did, sometimes people were like, "Hey, I can't really afford $500 because that's how much the tickets were." So
Yeah.
I'm like, "All right, like you don't have a job right now. I get that. Like what could you afford?" And maybe I'd give them the ticket for something less.
Yeah.
Um, and that's still fine because like that helps with the hotel room block obligation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, and I had people ask for student discounts and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
my policy was just like whatever. Like I'll I'll, I'll take some amount of money, anything, whatever, just to
Mhm.
get people there because it was almost more helpful to have people there than to have the revenue because every like missing seat cost a lot of money.
Right.
Yeah, and so just any way I could get people there.
Yeah. So you said lost money the last year just because of, agreements with the hotel that were exorbitant. The first year, also just because small. Did you break even or make a little bit of money? How did that go the second year?
First year lost about 2,000 bucks.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think it was like the costs were around 10,000, the revenue was around 10,000, but they were a little bit off in such a way that I lost about 2,000 bucks. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was
Hmm.
roughly in that range.
And then how was the second year?
The second one was bigger. I think it was like 60 or so people who came to that one.
Nice.
And the revenue and expenses were more. Um, I don't remember. Maybe it was like $30,000 in and
Hmm.
out. And then we ended up making a few thousand bucks on the second year.
Gotcha.
And then
Nice.
the third year was the worst.
Hmm.
Um, well, actually, okay, so like 80 people or so ended up coming. So it was the best in that sense. But
Right.
financially, it was the worst because we couldn't do it at the Tropicana anymore. We did it at the MGM Grand, and they were much more expensive, and they were stricter on what we had to have. Like for example, at Tropicana, we had no food and beverage minimum, but at
Yeah.
MGM Grand, we had that very large food and beverage minimum.
Yeah.
So I don't know the exact number, but when we when we settled up with the MGM Grand after the conference. So we paid them some amount up front.
Hmm.
Um, and then because we had like people missing from the room block and we had to spend money on food and beverage and stuff like that, we had to like settle up after that and they gave us a final additional bill. And that
Hmm.
additional bill was about 20,000 bucks.
Hmm.
Um, that doesn't mean we lost 20,000 bucks.
Yeah.
Um, but it was in that neighborhood. It was like somewhere between 10 and 20,000 bucks is how much we lost.
Yeah. Was that why you knew it was going to be more expensive? Was that why you decided to have sponsors the third year, or would you have had sponsors the third year regardless? One of the things I like about your conference is you keep it very simple. Like, there's you choose the speakers, you don't have like catering, like you keep it very simple, and that's very I guess inspiring, or it's just like, oh, maybe I can do a conference because I've been to Jason's conference and it's amazing, and I know multiple people who have said it was their favorite conference, and it kind of shows you don't need to have t-shirts and lunch and all this stuff to put on a good conference that people really enjoy. and maybe I could do it without a huge financial risk or without like having a full-time job of doing a conference. But did that keeping it simple was not having sponsors those previous years. Did that add a lot of work and did you just do it because you knew the expenses were going to be more that year?
I actually don't remember, but I think so. I think I did that because I knew the expenses were going to be higher.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I don't think I would do sponsors again, because it did add more work and it, not like work as in like a whole bunch of time, but just like it took up headspace, you know?
Right.
And it took up a lot more headspace than the time it took, and it just felt kind of, I wouldn't say it wasn't worth it, but well, maybe I would say it wasn't worth it because I don't really want to do it again. Um, and to be honest, I don't feel like I serve the sponsors all that well.
Mm,
Like I didn't have like banners with the sponsor logos and stuff like that. And I think
mhm,
some of the sponsors were expecting that. And so I felt bad about that. And I know that that kind of stuff is not a strength of mine.
mhm.
And with all this stuff, like I want to play to my strengths and not try to do these things that I'm not good at. And
Right.
that's a big part of the reason why I chose to do it, to do everything in such a simple way, because I
Hmm.
know that I'm not, I don't like administrative detail and stuff like that. And so I'm not
Hmm.
going to try to take on a bunch of that stuff. So I think if I do an event again, I would go back to making it even simpler and just do no sponsors.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's a an interesting approach because it's almost like did to have sponsors and it's almost required because of the expenses of putting on a conference. So it's interesting to think about like what can I do to make this simpler and could I do it without sponsors? Um, yeah, I want to think about that. I'll probably end up trying to get sponsors um, for my event, but it is interesting to have the option to not do that.
Hmm.
Um,
If I may ask, what stage are you at in the planning of your conference?
I am working on getting a venue right now.
Mhm.
I haven't reached out to any sponsors. I haven't reached out to any speakers. So very early on, I'm planning to have it in so about a year from now. So I'm giving myself a lot of time to plan it, and I'm glad because obviously everything always takes longer than you think it's going to.
Hmm.
And already, like, I'm like, okay, the first step in a conference, I'm gonna do this step by step. First step is to get a venue. I'm like, that'll take a week, 2 weeks max.
Ah,
And that was a month ago that I started
yeah.
looking for venues. So yeah, it's I'm glad I gave myself a year. But I want to nail down the venue and the date first. Step is going to be sponsors and trying to figure out like, okay, this is how much the venue is. I want to set my ticket prices lower, as low as possible, so that more people maybe can have the option of attending. Um, so that's going to depend on how much sponsorship I can get, and I am in the position of not having a following online at all, pretty much. I don't have social media. I have a LinkedIn. That's pretty much it, right? So to say, okay, what if only 20 people show up to this, and they're all my coworkers, you know? So yeah, I want to look for sponsors because I don't think I can depend on ticket sales to any degree. Um, but I am going to be doing a lot more marketing because I don't have that following. And
Hmm.
I want to be really creative with that and try to get this out to a lot of people. But yeah, I'm in the very, very beginning stages, and I have kind of have a picture of what is coming next, but very early stages.
And remind me, I think you told me, and maybe you even said, but again, the connection's been a little choppy. Are you having it in Albuquerque or somewhere else?
Yes, I'm gonna have it in Albuquerque.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and for venues, have you looked at like hotels, non-hotels? What have you looked at?
Right now, I'm talking with one hotel and one non-hotel.
Mm-hmm.
Weirdly, the hotel has actually been more responsive than the non-hotel. I really like both of them, particularly because of the area that they're in is very walkable. There's a lot of like dining options, and I've heard from you and multiple other organizers to not do catering if you can avoid it, and that area that they are in would be really easy um, because there's a ton of dining options within a 5-minute walk.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I really like that area, and it's a nice area. So I'm hoping to get one of those venues. So yeah, and I'm hoping that Las Vegas is a lot more of a draw. um, but I think I've talked to a couple people and they're like, oh yeah, like I've driven through Albuquerque or I've been once and I really liked it. I think people do have an interest to come here. We'll see if it's strong enough that it'll get people out here. But yeah, I think that it's worth coming out here. And I'm hoping to put on a conference also that will make it worth it because there's like two parts to every conference, right? It's the conference itself, but it's also the location. People
Mm-hmm.
would like to make a trip out of most conferences so that you get the conference, but you also get to like see a new city or you get to visit some friends or whatever it is. Part of it for me with Sin City Ruby was I had family out there. So it's great for me because I went to the conference. I would go visit my aunt and uncle for 2 days, stay the weekend with them. Um, so yeah, we'll see if Albuquerque is a draw, but I especially my first conference, I didn't want to organize it in a place far away, um, just to try to keep that as simple as possible and not
Right.
add any uh, complications there that would make it harder than it needs to be on my first go round.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see a hunch that I have had about Sin City Ruby because you said that I have like a following online and stuff, which is true. But I really struggled to sell tickets for Sin City Ruby. And it's not because people don't like the conference, because like you
Mhm.
said, a lot of people really are enthusiastic about Sin City Ruby. They love it.
Yeah,
Um, but the West is just really sparsely populated. Other than the coast, the West is very sparse.
right,
And so I wondered, like, is it because there's not much local draw? Like, there's not a big Nevada Ruby community, you know?
right. Yeah.
Um, and I imagine there's not a huge New Mexico Ruby community.
Not huge, but there are a couple companies in Albuquerque um, that I'm going to reach out to and see if they will sponsor, see if they will
Hmm.
send some people. Um, and there's like a boot camp too at a community college here um, that I want to reach out to. So I'm hoping I can get a good number of people locally to come.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, and I do think people would find it an interesting place to visit. I think there's something to the idea of like visiting a place that you might not have visited otherwise. Like when Adrian Marin had his conference in Romania, which is still going to happen this year too. Um, I never would have gone to Romania for any reason otherwise.
Yeah.
Nothing against Romania, but it just wasn't high on the list, you know?
Yeah, super
Um,
far away.
yeah, but I'm really glad I went.
Hmm.
Um, because, precisely because I never would have gone there otherwise. And it's
Hmm.
like Albuquerque, um, you might people might have a reason to go to like Chicago or San Francisco or whatever, but not always Albuquerque, but they might be interested to go there precisely because it's not somewhere that like work would take them to
Right.
for some other reason.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the hope. We'll see.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite conferences or favorite conference experiences as an attendee?
I really, really liked Friendly RB.
Mm,
That's probably my favorite one. Both because of the organizers are great people
mm,
and the location, Bucharest, Romania, is great. And I took my family and we took a trip up into the mountains in Romania and stuff like that. That was really cool. Um, I think that's my favorite one. It doesn't happen anymore, but Southeast Ruby was really cool.
hmm.
Another small conference that took place in Nashville. That was Jason Charnes's conference.
Yep, I just
So I
talked to him.
Yeah, I really like those small ones.
Yeah. Is it yeah, what do you feel like the differences are between like a Rails conf or a Rails world where there's thousands of people as the smaller conferences? Like what do you like about each of those?
With the big conferences, by the way, I really like Rails World.
Mm,
Um, I've only been there once. I went to the one in Toronto, but I really liked that. I thought it was really well done. Um, at the big conferences, like at Rails World, I was just like flitting around from person to person, and I
mm,
never got to spend a lot of time with any one person
mm.
because it was like everybody I've ever met is there.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to like neglect people. Um, but I also like want to be able to spend more than 5 minutes with people, but it wasn't really possible. I was just being like bounced around like a pinball at the conference,
Yeah.
'cause I just kept running into people I knew. Um, and so that's like it's not exactly a good or bad thing. It's just very different. But what I like about small conferences is you can spend a lot of time with people. And ironically, you can meet more people at a small conference than at a big conference because you're just like in more contact with the same people. You're like with the same group the entire time.
Yeah.
And so you almost can't avoid meeting almost all the other people there. That's what I like about that.
Hmm. Yeah. Love that. Um, were there any experiences specifically that you would like to see? Like, what was there anything about Rails World? You said you love Rails World. Is there anything about Rails World that you think we could replicate in smaller conferences, or is it unique to that conference?
Um, I don't think it's unique to that conference. I really like Amanda Perino's mindset toward it. She's the organizer of Rails World and the executive director of the Rails Foundation.
Hmm.
Um, she places a high importance on the venue, on the physical space that people are in. And I think it makes a really big difference.
Hmm.
And after that one in Toronto, DHH went on the Remote Ruby podcast, I believe it was, and he talked about how it really makes a big difference being in a nice venue. That one in Toronto, it was like a kind of indoor outdoor space.
Hmm.
Um, the weather just happened to be perfect. It was like room temperature outside pretty much. So
Okay.
you like kind of couldn't tell even if you were like inside or outside. It's like I'm inside, but we're breathing the fresh air of the outdoors and you know,
Yeah.
um, and there were like a bunch of trees inside. And so it was
Oh.
very green and verdant inside. And it was just really nice. It was like a pleasant, relaxing atmosphere. It wasn't some soulless, windowless basement or something like that,
Mhm.
which, most conferences
Yeah.
are like that. And it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's just so cool to be in a cool space.
Yeah.
So that was like that. Um, my recollection is that Southeast Ruby in Nashville was in like a pretty cool hotel in a
Mhm.
cool spot. That added a lot to it. Friendly RB had a similar thing going. They had a cool venue, and being in Bucharest was it really added to it. So I think
Mhm.
the physical feel of the venue makes a big difference.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. I haven't been to Rails World and yeah, didn't get a ticket this year either, but I hope to make it one day because I've heard, yeah, just a lot of good stuff about that conference. Uh and it's one of the few conferences that just sell out like that.
Hmm.
Um, which is interesting. I don't know. Why do you think that's because that it's it's DHH and the Rails Foundation behind it, or why does that sell out so quickly? Why are people so eager to go to that conference that it sells out within half an hour?
Yeah, I think it's DHH. I,
Yeah.
I think it's because like that is the flagship Rails conference.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a major draw.
Hmm. And,
Um,
again, Amanda does a really nice job of organizing the conference, but
yeah,
I don't know if people knew that that was going to happen. No one had ever attended one the first year that it happened, and I think it still sold out like instantly. So I think it's just the draw of DHH and the fact that it's the flagship Rails conference.
yep, yeah. Okay. I'm gonna put Amanda Perino on my list. I think she was already on there, but I would love to talk to her about conference organizing. But are there any other people that you think I should talk to about conference organizing?
I think you probably have all these people on your list already. But I mentioned Adrian. There's Jeremy Smith,
Hmm.
Jason Charns, who you mentioned you talked to.
Hmm.
There's Spike Alacqua. I'm not sure how to say his last name.
Yep. Yep.
Organizer of Rocky Mountain Ruby.
Yep. Yeah. Talk with him.
Yeah, yeah. So I think you probably already have most of the same people on your list.
Cool. Yeah. Um, last bit, any advice or words of wisdom or inspiration for any other conference organizers out there that you have?
Don't do it. Just kidding.
No, no, no.
No, definitely do it. But I think a really good piece of advice is again the Andy Kroll advice. He
Yeah,
wasn't even intending it as advice, but like design it so that it'll be design it so it'll work out okay no matter how big or small it ends up being. I think
yeah,
that's a really smart way to approach it.
yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. All righty, Jason. Well, I appreciate your time and I again, just I loved Sin City Ruby. It was part of the inspiration for me to do this because Sin City Ruby and RailsConf were the main conferences that I went to. Both of them ending this year kind of got me thinking like, okay, what am I going to do next year? And then I was like, well, what if I I try my own conference? So
Hmm.
um, thank you again for your time and for Sin City
Thank
Ruby
you.
itself. And are you going to RailsConf?
No plans to as of now.
Okay. All right.
I'm not sure that I'm not going, but sadly, it looks like probably not.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm sure I'll see you around other places and I'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All righty. Thanks, Jason.